All right, did want to spend some time talking about Brian Kelly replacements. Huge story in college football. Brian Kelly fired by LSU. Look, I think I'm very into being open and transparent here on the show. I think I've been wrong a lot. I've been right a lot as well, but I've also been wrong a lot. Additionally, they were my national title pick, the LSU Tigers, and they're a disaster here at this point as they've dropped several games, back-to-back losses to Vandy, obviously, and then this A&M one at home was really, really ugly. Got to give a lot of credit to Marcel Reed in the game for how he played. I think he kind of entered the Heisman conversation a little bit there for the Aggies, but, I mean, that's not the standard at LSU. The standard is national titles. They've been able to do it 3 times with their last 3 coaches, right? Ed Orgeron, Les Miles, and, of course, Nick Saban, all winning national titles within their first couple of years of being the coach. I think that was the expectation here for Brian Kelly. He didn't feel like he could do it at Notre Dame. He thought coming down south he would have the ability to do it, but it's a tough world here in the SEC. Nick Saban made it look really, really easy for a long time, but it is not easy, and the LSU Tigers really, really struggled. And Scott Woodward, their AD, made the decision to make a change here at this point. And I do want to roll through some names here. Now, in our previous, segments that we've done on Napier replacements and James Franklin replacements, I feel like I've had kind of a good feel for, where those coaching searches might go. I don't really feel that here at this point, and here's why. LSU, and I said this at the top of the show, and you don't have to agree with this. Look, I don't think it's the number 1 job in college football, but you do have to agree that it is a top 5 job. When you're down in Louisiana, you don't have any really competition in your state, right? You're the state school. There's a lot of good football players down there. It's a prideful, program with great tradition. Their athletic department puts a ton of money into their football team, the environment, Death Valley. It's incredible. Trust me, the LSU is a top 5 job, and I think the LSU job is a better job, certainly than the Florida job and certainly than the Penn State job there as well. And it's a big-time opening. This is a big-time opening, and we want to roll through some names here. And I think when you have an opening like this, you have to call everybody, right, to try to fill this opening. And I'll explain what I mean by that here in a second. But Joel Klatt pointed this out, the first 2 guys that he would call, and I kind of laughed initially, and then I was like, well, he's right, to be honest with you. And these 2 names, I'm not predicting that these 2 names, that either of these 2 guys will get the job or want to come back, but I think they have to be probably your 2 first calls. I agree with Joel Klatt when he says that, and that's Nick Saban and Urban Meyer. Right? Nick Saban, of course, what is he, 73 years of age now? He's clearly living a great life right now. He loves what he's doing on game day. He said repeatedly that he has no interest in getting back into coaching. Now, that was when it was just Penn State and Florida. Obviously, he has ties to LSU. He won a national title at LSU. That could be intriguing. And also, look, I think $15 million minimum is what the offer. And candidly, it wouldn't shock me if they offered Nick Saban $20 million. Right, and that's a lot of money to turn down if you're Nick Saban. I think he's done. I think he was done at Alabama. I think the NIL kind of wore him out. He was ready to be done, hang out with his family. I think he's found, new purpose in his life. He's just been coaching and recruiting for so long, and I think he's really enjoying himself. And I'm going to go out here and say that there is no way that Nick Saban takes the LSU job. But if you're LSU, if you're Scott Woodward, or if you're doing this search, he absolutely needs to be the first name that you call, and you need to offer him a blank check in the process there as well. And he's not going to do it. It won't happen, but he's got to be your first call. Urban Meyer as well. Again, I think he's done, right? Now, the thing about Urban Meyer is he changes his mind a lot, right? I mean, he left Florida, and then he was like, I'm done. And then he came back to Florida, right? And then he's like, yeah, I'm probably going to be done. Well, then he takes the Ohio State job. And then he's like, well, I'm done. And then he takes the Jaguar job. So Urban Meyer changes his mind a lot. I think there's a better chance that he goes back to Florida than LSU, right? He doesn't really have any connections, I don't believe, to LSU. I think, again, LSU is a bigger job than the Florida job. But I don't think Urban Meyer's going to come back. I think he's ready. I think he's comfortable with his role. I think he had that bit of an itch still, even after he left Ohio State. You saw him go to the Jaguars, and I think that kind of, he was like, he was in over his head, and he was ready to be done. But I think those are the first 2 calls that you make. And again, Joe Klatt said that, and I kind of was like, whatever. And I was like, well, it's the LSU job. And those are the 2, I 100% believe that Nick Saban could still come in and win there, and I 100% believe that Urban Meyer could do the same there as well. I don't think either one of those guys do. I think there's a little bit likelier of a chance Urban Meyer does than Nick Saban, but I'm not predicting it. And then Lane Kiffin, he's sitting here, and he's in a really good spot right now because you have all these massive jobs that are open, LSU, Penn State, Florida. Florida State could be coming open as well. Arkansas is open. I obviously would not put that in the same category as the other three that I just mentioned. But, there's not a ton of big-time candidates out there, right? It's not like, oh, this guy's going to be a star. He's going to get a big job. Or this guy's had a big job, but he doesn't right now, but he's due for another big one. Like, Lane Kiffin is the candidate that is head and shoulders above everybody else here at this point, above literally everybody else. So he's in a really good spot because Penn State wants him, Florida wants him, LSU wants him, and obviously Ole Miss wants him as well, and he's got a decision to make. He says that he doesn't make decisions off of money. Okay, yeah, we'll see. If I'm Ole Miss, I'm doing everything in our power to keep him, right? But I think, when you have the LSU opportunity, you have the Florida opportunity. Kiffin's obviously a very ambitious guy, and if those two jobs are open, it feels like he's going to leave for one of them. Now, which one? I was thinking about this morning, and I don't know, right? I think LSU's a bigger job, but I think, Kiffin, like he was at FAU. I think he likes the state of Florida. He spends a lot of time there. He feels more like a Florida guy than an LSU guy, right? But I would be very interested to see because they're both going to want him and they're both going to call him, and there's a chance that he's picking between those two schools. I don't know. My gut says he would go Florida, but I think LSU maybe could offer him some more money, and you could argue. I don't think you could argue it's a better job. I think there's more resources and more of a tradition, I would say. But we'll see. That's kind of the top name. But again, it's a job like LSU, so you got to be calling everybody for this opening. This isn't just some small opening. No, this is the LSU opening, and that means I'm calling Dan Lanning and Marcus Freeman. Now, it's very interesting because when the Alabama job opened, now there's been different reports. I think Greg Byrne, the AD for Alabama, his sights were set on Kalen DeBoer. That was his guy. But very quickly after that, it's like Dan Lanning's like, nope, I'm staying, right? And, Sark's like, nope, I'm staying at Texas. And, I think the LSU job is probably better than the Alabama job, and there's not the pressure of replacing Nick Saban there as well. But it'd be interesting. I think what Dan Lanning's doing at Oregon is tremendous, and I think you can win 100%. I think you can win a national championship at Oregon, especially with the backing of Phil Knight and Nike. But Marcus Freeman, could he perhaps, follow Brian Kelly, right? Obviously, he was he replaced him at Notre Dame. Could he replace him again there at LSU? And he had, an opportunity to go be the DC at LSU, and he said, nope, I want to be the DC at Notre Dame. It'll be interesting to see because I think those two guys are kind of, they're younger guys, right? Marcus Freeman, they're both really young guys and have done a tremendous job. So maybe they're comfortable at Notre Dame and Oregon respectively, but I think as far as realistic guys go, and I would call those two guys before Lane Kiffin, by the way, if I'm LSU. But, again, I think you can win at I know you can definitely win at Oregon. I think you can win at Notre Dame. And, Freeman's got a huge family. He has an opportunity to be a legend at Notre Dame and be there for a really long time and potentially win a national title. He was there in the title game last year. So I'd be very interested to see if Marcus Freeman would leave. He doesn't feel like an SEC guy, right? He spent much of his life in Ohio. Like, if the Ohio State job was open or something like that would make more sense for a guy like Marcus Freeman. Obviously, Brian Day is he's in a great spot right now. That job's not coming open anytime soon. But my point is, I don't know if I could see, Marcus Freeman fitting in the SEC. Whereas a guy like Dan Lanning, he was at Georgia for a while, did a tremendous job. I could see him being the coach at LSU or being the coach at Florida. But I just think that's not, you're moving your family across the country. Now, if you have ties and you want to live in the South, that's one thing. But I don't think you have, when you look at the Oregon job and look at the LSU job, where you sit there and say, oh, 100% you have a better opportunity to win at LSU. You got to play in the SEC. You got to play a tougher schedule. And, he's got a really good thing going at Oregon. And if I'm Oregon, I do everything in your power to keep him. But those are so you got Saban and Meyer, you got to call them. Saban's not coming. Meyer, 1% chance, right? And then you move on, and then you got Dan Lanning, Marcus Freeman, and Lane Kiffin are kind of your top three guys. But it wouldn't surprise me if Lane went to Florida. It wouldn't surprise me if Lanning and Freeman stand pat at their respective schools. And now you're like, okay, where do we go from here? And I guess you got to call James Franklin. I think it would be a horrible mistake to hire him. James Franklin at LSU, that would just objectively be hilarious to see that. He's not an SEC guy. Like, that would just, to fire Brian Kelly and go to James Franklin, like, that would just be a horrible decision by Scott Woodward, who, by the way, has kind of got a mess on his hands here, as he was responsible for the Jimbo Fisher hire at A&M, and now he's got the Brian Kelly thing at LSU. Those are two pretty significant swings and misses. He absolutely has to knock this hire fire out of the park, and James Franklin isn't a guy that would do that. Joe Brady, his name's got floated around. Brady, of course, was the passing game coordinator the 1 year at LSU. A great year, obviously one of the best years in college football history for any team. As it was the year Burrow and them won, obviously, the title in 19. He, to me, seems like an NFL guy. He hasn't been, this is how things go with coordinators. You got 1 year and you're like, oh, you're some top guy, and then you decide to stick around. It's like, well, maybe he's not that guy anymore. You saw it with Anarumo, right? Remember, he was getting all that head coaching buzz, and the next thing you know, he's getting fired, right? So it's a very year-to-year basis in the NFL, but I just can't see Joe Brady kind of being like a recruiter, right? It's like that. And it's not like he had some long career at LSU. I believe it was just the 1 year in which he was there. I'm sure Tiger fans down south would love to have him back, but he feels like an NFL guy to me. And I think, why would you want to leave Josh Allen? One, if you're going to leave for Josh Allen, I think you would leave for an NFL head coaching job. But, I mean, these college coaches are getting paid more than these NFL coaches, but it's much more of a year-round thing, obviously, with recruiting. But people have thrown his name around, and I just don't really see it happening. Lincoln Riley. Is another name. I don't think, Lincoln Riley obviously struggling at USC. I thought it would look better than it has to this point. Now, it's gone in an upward direction, right, as it relates to Lincoln Riley at USC. He's gotten a little bit better each and every year. I thought it would be better quicker. But let's be very clear. When he left Oklahoma, remember it was, he's going to take the LSU job. And then he went out there and was like, guys, I'm not taking the LSU job. And then he took the USC job. And it's like, okay, so, you didn't technically lie to us, but, like, come on, you were leaving anyway. That was kind of a surprise. The LSU job, he could have had it. So that's why I don't really consider him as a guy that's going to get this job, because he could have had it a few years ago, and then he said no and went to SC. And would you just quit on SC to come back to a job that you could have had? Like, that really wouldn't make much sense to me. Again, Lincoln Riley, you got to be tough and physical in the trenches in the SEC, and that's just not what his teams have really done. He doesn't strike me really as an SEC guy. He's got unfinished business at SC. I still have some belief that he could turn that around and make it a perennial power. And it was a surprise when he passed up on LSU for the SC job, but I would be shocked if he ultimately was the guy at USC. Next up here, John Summerall, head coach of Tulane. And, he's kind of a younger guy, up-and-coming guy, right, in the state, right? He'll get some buzz. I think there's a possibility that he could be the guy, but I think that's when you swing and miss and you get turned down by a lot of different guys. And, again, it's not like pre-NIL, pre-conference realignment, right? The LSU job is a top 5 job in the country, but at one point it's like, if the LSU job's open, you're absolutely leaving Ole Miss to get it. At one point, you're absolutely leaving Oregon to get it. You're absolutely leaving Notre Dame to get it. I don't know if that's the case anymore. And, again, you've seen it with job openings in the past. With guys like, Sark and Dan Lanning had zero interest in the Alabama job. Zero interest. Now, from an NIL perspective, it's a little different, right? Because Alabama's NIL is not, at the top of the country by any stretch. It's not, LSU's starting to spend a little bit more this past year. They spent a ton in the NIL and in the portal. But it's just different this day and age. It's not like, it's not as likely for some guy to leave some job for a big-time job, because where he has it right now, he's getting paid a ton of money, and he believes that he can win. Right? You look back to several years ago in college football, you go into the season, there was only 6 teams maybe that could actually win the national title. Whereas this year, I think it's 15 to 20. I think you can make the argument, have a chance. Now, certainly there's a few that have much better chance than the others. But I just think the scope of college football right now, it's not as, it's a lot more balanced. It's not just a few teams that can win it. So we'll see. Next guy here, Brent Key. Look, I'm a Brent Key guy. What he's doing at Georgia Tech is unbelievable. I thought they would have dropped the game. By now, they haven't. Haynes King, tremendous. Brent Key deserves a lot of credit because he doesn't have a ton of talent on that team, and he's just winning games, continues to win games. And I think he should get a call from all these schools. I think Penn State could be a really good fit for Brent Key. But even if I'm these SEC schools, I'm calling him there as well. And I would be surprised if he was the head coach at Georgia Tech next year. But we'll see. He's a guy that I'm calling. Eli Drinkwitz, again, you just kind of go down the list here, and if you're getting rejected by, the top guys that I already mentioned, you're bringing up Drinkwitz. And I'm not very high on Drinkwitz, but what he's done in Missouri has been impressive. And, if these guys, their top candidates, aren't saying yes, Drinkwitz could be that next, guy down the list as a guy that's going to get an opportunity here. Yeah, I think it would be a mistake for LSU or Florida to hire him. I don't think that's really going to transcend your program in any way. But we'll see. I think he's that kind of next hot name that's, coaching in the SEC, knows what it's like, but doesn't really have the resources that a bunch of other teams have there as well. And the final guy I have here is Rhett Lashley. I've got a lot of belief in him. SMU's kind of taken a step back this year. He's a really good coach. He's done a lot of good things at that program for SMU. Can he, win at a big-time job? I don't know. But I do think he's a really good coach and someone that should be considered. But that's kind of the list right now. And, again, I don't have it ranked, right? Again, it's the LSU job. It's such a big job. Like, yeah, you better call Nick Saban and offer him everything he wants. Could possibly want. Yeah, you better call Urban Meyer. Yeah, you better do everything in your power to get a Dan Lanning or a Marcus Freeman or a Lane Kiffin to leave. And those 5 are like your top guys. And again, I've said this several times. I want to emphasize this. Nick Saban isn't going to do it, and Urban Meyer probably is not going to do it either. But just the caliber of coaches that they are and as big of a job as it is, you got to give them a call. And then you work down the list. Brady, don't think. Franklin, be a mistake. He'll probably get an interview, though. Lincoln Riley, he had an opportunity in the past. Sumrall could be a name, right? Has success in the state. Younger guy, up-and-coming guy. That could potentially be, an answer for you. Brent Key, Drinkwitz, Lashley. That's kind of my list here at this point, and we'll revisit this. But it's going to be absolutely fascinating to see these vacancies get filled here going forward. And just massive jobs. Florida State could very well come open as another job. That's a big-time job there as well. But that's kind of our Brian Kelly replacements here.